All right, this Council Committee of the Whole of October 23rd, 2023 is called to order at 6:30 p.m. And we have a budget update is our only item on the agenda. There's several parts to it, but I will turn it over to Managing Director Egert to give us some opening remarks.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Clark, and good afternoon, members of council. I have a few introductory comments just to set the table on the 2024 budget update. So as you recall, the 2023 and 2024 budgets were originally approved by council a year ago, December 2022. This 2024 budget update includes and reflects our current environment, changing market conditions, updated management assumptions. Many of the key assumptions remain largely unchanged. Further, as it relates to the Municipal Government Act, we are responding to that, which requires each municipality to have an approved balanced budget in place by January the 1st. You'll also see a section on commodities where we have updates on price and volume, as well as gas prices and operating and maintenance expenses, as well as a draft bylaw. So today, through this Council Committee of the Whole meeting, you'll have the opportunity to hear and debate the 2024 budget update. The recommendation coming from this Council Committee will be forwarded and considered for approval by Council on November the 20th. So at this time, I want to express my appreciation to my colleagues that prepared this budget presentation. Aaron Heimer, Financial Planning Analyst, and Travis Chutcher, Manager of Energy Marketing and Business Analysis, as well as their respective teams. So thank you. Some of the broad assumptions that we had presented to Council last year still continue to be in place, and this 2022 budget update continues the effort to advance these objectives. I'm just going to quickly go through the four objectives that we've laid out a year ago. Number one, to reflect and advance Council's strategic priorities, where we are going. So administration has prepared their objectives to reflect how we're going to get there. Business plans, departmental mandates, structure, key objectives, initiatives, and performance measures. Objective number two, to preserve the high quality of municipal and utility services valued by residents. So we did conduct a Ipsos survey in August of last year, 2022, that reported high satisfaction, 90% satisfied with city customer services, with many things standing out as highlights, including staff being courteous through customer service. Objective number three, to provide a competitive property tax and utility structure. So we often refer to the City of Calgary, a survey of property tax and utility charges. The current survey on their website is for 2021, and we're expecting the 2022 survey any week now. They continually rank Medicine Hat as one of the lowest property tax and utility charges for detached median single-family homes amongst their respondents. So we're pretty proud about that. We're also proactively dealing with Council's recommendation of electricity through the interim rate plans, which was approved by last Council meeting, as well as the review of the electricity business, which is ongoing. The fourth objective is to balance financial sustainability while maintaining organizational health. So we do have a few things related to this objective, including our treasury management remains prudent on investments, debt, and reserves. And we're in a different position today than we were just a few years ago in 2018. So this particular budget that was approved, plus included in this update, reflects both dimensions of financial sustainability and organizational health. As you hear the presentation later, you're going to see that we've reduced the overall budget gap by $1 million. So previously, Council had approved a $6 million budget gap, which was funded by reserves. That's now being reduced to $5 million. We're still on a pathway and on track to balance the 25 and 26 municipal budget. So we're looking forward to presenting that a year from now. So one last thing I want to highlight is this aspect of financial sustainability and why that's important. And financial sustainability does require a longer term view in terms of achieving that and maintaining that over time. What's clear is financial sustainability and the stability of this organization leads to wonderful opportunities to provide a livable community. In conclusion here, we are respectfully requesting this council committee to consider and deliberate the 2024 budget update that you're going to hear in a minute, and that's both operating and capital, and that will then be brought forward to council on November the 20th. That'll include amendment to operating budgets, amendment to capital and major operating expense budgets, and then also some changes in how we fund some of our capital. So what I'll do now, Mayor Clark, is invite my colleague Aaron Heimer to join us. Aaron.
Welcome, Aaron. And just before you get started, I will note, since there's a presentation and people can't see, that we do have Councillor Ramona Robbins on Teams. So you have the floor when you're ready.
Great. Thank you, Mayor Clark. Thank you, Managing Director Egert. As Managing Director Egert said, today we're going to be discussing the 2024 budget update. Some of the key points that Managing Director Egert has pointed out just previously is that the update that we are proposing largely doesn't change the key budget assumptions that we presented to this council last year. It continues to achieve the broad objectives that were laid out, the 4 objectives that Managing Director Egert laid out. The proposed amendments reduces the budget gap, the municipal budget gap, by $1 million. These changes are necessary to reflect the current environment and support a financially sustainable and livable community. In today's discussion, we are going to have some opening remarks followed by, I want to start by taking you through a journey of what we have already seen in 2023 as far as approvals that have happened by council that impact the 2024 budget. That'll give us a good starting place then to discuss some of the amendments that we are looking to propose today. We'll go into some detail, starting with the municipal, which is that component of the budget that focuses in on the community services, police services, corporate, strategic governance, fleet and facilities, and the Medicine Hat Airport. And then we'll focus in on, I'll pass it over to my colleague, Travis Tucksher, who will take us through the commodities section. And then finally, we do have a presentation today by our library, who will be coming up after these 2 presentations have been completed. So why do we do a budget adjustment? Well, the main reason is because during the year things change. We want to have a budget that reflects accurately our current situation so that it can be used appropriately as a financial control tool. We make major adjustment changes for things like revenue, things that have happened in the organization, such as corporate restructure, as well as things that we've noted throughout the year by using the budget, budget oversights or changes that we have made in estimates. By and large, what we're looking to do in this 24 update is we're looking to do a more high-level adjustment. We're not looking to get down into all of the nitty-gritty details like we have in previous budget updates. The reason for this is in previous cycles, we were doing a 4-year cycle. And so a lot changes in 4 years. We will be going through a full budget cycle in just about a year from now. So with that shorter interim period, we're doing a little bit of a condensed version of a budget update. Okay, and so what we're proposing, which will be coming back to the floor in regular council on November 20th, but what we'll be discussing today in these deliberations are the following approvals. The recommendation for City Council to approve the amended 2024 operating budgets, the amended 2024 capital and major operating budgets, and the amended 2023-2024 capital funding sources. Okay, so let's start this conversation by looking at where we have come to date. These numbers on the screen represent decisions that have been made by this council during the year of 2023. So the budget was approved in December of 2022, and certain decisions throughout the year have increased the expenditures within the budget. Specifically in the municipal area, the approvals that have taken place in council have increased our budget by about $1 million. So these items are not the focus tonight of our deliberations. These things were approved in council, deemed necessary in regular council. They're not up for discussion tonight to relook at these items, but it does give you a picture of where we're starting from when we're discussing budget update. Okay, and the items up on the screen here show some of the capital items that have been approved to date, approximately about $13.2 million in 2023. The numbers up on the screen, again, are not meant to be for deliberation, again, just to provide that context. However, it should be noted that these items were considered necessary at the time when they were approved, and certain items such as when you look at, say, fire engines up there for $1.7 million, that item was a request to expedite the purchase of a number of fire engine units with the net benefit of cost savings to the city. So the numbers don't necessarily tell the whole story, but it does give you a bit of context. Okay, so that brings us to where we are today. And let's look at the net impact of the proposed changes that we're proposing today on the net fiscal targets. So we have essentially 4 units, 4 different components of the city that we track. 3 of them are what we consider business units. They're for-profit entities, and the municipal being the odd duck out. The municipal is tracked through a different fiscal target that we've referred to as the budget gap. This is a target that is set by the Municipal Governing Act. Essentially, it's the amount of budget that we are required that we essentially are not able to cover through our cash flows in during the year. The remainder of the budget gap is covered off by transfers from reserve at the end of the year. So during 2024, our original budget that was approved in December showed a budget gap of approximately about $6 million. With the approved amendments, that number will drop down to about $5.1 million. This, as Managing Director Egert had said, is still putting us on that path towards budget balance in 25-26. We've represented the land and utilities as well up here for you. However, there are no changes being proposed for the land or utilities business units. The final one up here is the commodities business unit, and the commodities business unit is showing an increase to what we call EBITDA, or earnings before interest, tax, and depreciation, of $26.6 million. Okay, so just to zoom in then on that municipal budget gap figure, which is now represented on the bottom of the table that you see. This gives you a little bit of a breakdown of how that number comes to be. And in the far right gray column, you can see the requested amendments that we will be going through in some detail today. And specifically, we're going to be focusing in on the changes proposed to revenue, expense, and then to the transfers to MOE. So the proposed amendments to the municipal operating budget will increase our revenues by 5.5 million, increase the expense by 3.3 million, and there will be an increase to what we call transfers to MOE, or transfers to major operating budget, which we'll explain a little bit more later on. So the net effect of these is actually an improvement to the bottom line from our original budget of about 0.9 million. Okay, zooming in on revenue then. Let's talk about what's going on in revenue. So the requested amendments that you see up on the screen total about 5.5 million in increased revenue. This consists of 0.5 million for municipal taxes, primarily due to adjusted physical growth. On May 1st of 2023, Council approved the property tax bylaw during its regular council meeting. The briefing note accompanying the bylaw called for an amendment to the 23 budget because there was an actual growth, a physical growth of 2.1% when we had only budgeted for 1%. So as a result of that, we had a budget adjustment for the 2023 budget, which improved our anticipated property tax revenue by about $500,000. So the adjustment that you're seeing on the screen is just the carry forward of that physical growth from 2023. There are no proposed amendments to the property tax rate or any kind of growth anticipated for, changes to growth anticipated for 2024. All of those key budget assumptions remain intact. The second one here is $4.2 million for investment income. And this is primarily due to a higher earnings, primarily due to a revised portfolio balance. Due to some of the changes that have happened in 2023, we've increased our estimate for what we would be carrying as a portfolio balance, specifically in the municipal investment portfolio, from 323 million up to 440. That's a change of about $117 million. And as a result, the investment income is anticipated to increase by about 4.2 million. There is an offset to this as well, which we'll see in the expense section, because increased revenue also means increased management fees. The next item on the list is 0.6 million for government grants. This is primarily due to the MSI operating grant. The MSI operating grant is a grant that we received from the province to cover off operating expenditures. During the previous provincial budget, it was announced that they were going to double what we received for MSI operating, and so that's what's being reflected here. The purpose of this increase is to cover off some of the costs that have been downloaded by municipalities, by the province over the last number of years, including changes to our fine revenue share, as well as grants in lieu of property taxes, which have decreased, as well as a number of other miscellaneous costs. The next item on the list is just 0.2 million for other minor adjustments. Then flipping over and looking at the expense side, we have here a total increase to expense anticipated of $3.3 million. This consists of $1.1 million for salaries and wages. This was primarily due to the corporate restructuring. There was as a part of that corporate restructuring, there was identified the need for a couple of additional positions within the organization. In addition to that, the Medicine Police Association settled their agreement earlier this year. That agreement stretched back into 2020, and as a result of that retroactive adjustment to wages, there has been an increase to the base wages for police salaries compared to what was budgeted for 2024. It's important to note that that adjustment is just to bring our budget up to actuals. It's not representing an additional increase to positions or police wages. The next item that we have here is 1.5 million for contracted goods and services. And this is the one that I was mentioning before. Almost all of that is related to higher investment management fees related to the 4.2 million that we saw in investment revenue on the other side. The next item is 0.4 million for grants and other transfers. And this is primarily due to some minor adjustments for government grants. We did see on the revenue side that there were some increases to some minor grants besides the MSI operating. And with increased revenues, there's also increased expenses. But the primary one here is a request from the library. And just as a note, the library will be coming down to provide a presentation, so I would request that we reserve any questions related to library until they've had a chance to present and explain the request. And then the final one here is 0.3 million for other operating expenses due to higher grants in lieu cancellation expense. As we mentioned before, higher property taxes. We also have a number of properties that we own that are operated or have buildings operated by the province, and the province has a certain component of their property tax that they do not pay. There's about a 50% that we have to write off at the end of the year. So that's what's being represented up there with that. So higher property taxes offset by higher grants in lieu cancellation expense. I will note here as well that we are still working with our departments to highlight any needs that they may have. If there are any major items that have not been presented to you here in this conversation, they will be highlighted when we come back for a the regular council meeting on November 20th. So with regard to the key budget assumptions, we wanted to represent this just to give kind of a bigger picture here of where we started last year with the budget. If you'll remember last year, early in the budget cycle, administration had come to council and had presented a number of key budget assumptions. These were guideposts or managerial assumptions that we were going to utilize in order to build our budget. What we're representing here is that those key budget assumptions remain largely unchanged. The property tax, as we mentioned before, although it is increasing, we are not proposing an increase to property tax rates. Property tax rates in the previous budget were set at 4% with a 1% assessment growth. The 4% rate increase to property taxes was meant to offset our anticipated municipal inflation, represented in the expense assumption section below. The only thing that's really changed here is our annual investment returns, which have slightly dropped from about 4.58% down to 4.46. Excuse me.
So you mentioned earlier that we saw an increase in investment returns. We're just projecting that it's going to go down?
Thank you, Mayor Clark. We are anticipating that our annual investment rate of return is going to remain slightly, it's slightly lower than what we had originally anticipated. We're being a little bit more conservative with the number. Just due to some volatility right now, rising inflation, the possibility of a recession, the global markets, and instability. However, with that, we also have a larger portfolio balance due to profits that we've experienced throughout the year. And so that is offsetting quite a bit with the $117 million increase to the portfolio balance. Okay, and there's this one item that we mentioned before, this $250,000 for what we call transfer to MOE, or major operating expense. This is an operating expense item, but we treat it a little bit differently. So what is a major operating expense? Well, typically it's an expense that is large and one-time in nature. It's not a recurring item. And it may span over a couple of years. And so for that reason, we often treat it like we would treat capital, which you approve once and then it can be spent over the course of a couple of years. This keeps it out of our normal operating expenses so that it doesn't overinflate those recurring costs that happen every year. And so for presentation purposes, it is represented below the line as a transfer to MOE. But this just allows a department to carry forward an approval without having to come back every year to have that approval in subsequent years. So what we are requesting as far as major operating expenses go is an increase for the Airport Strategic Master Plan. This Airport Strategic Master Plan was last updated in 2006. So this item is required by a lot of federal and provincial grants in order to receive funding. And so this is something that we feel is a need to fast track. Okay, moving on to capital. So those were the operating items, but looking at capital here, we have bunched together municipal and utilities. I'll just make note that there are some items here that impact utilities. But primarily we're looking at the municipal business unit. I'll be all right. I'll make it. Apologize, I have a bit of a cold. So the, thank you. We have one item that we are requesting to increase this year, and that is an increase to the 3rd Street Renewal Project. This project was previously budgeted in 2023. However, due to the price of inflation, as well as a bit of an increase to scope in order to capitalize on some opportunities to save operating costs and optimize projects in the future, we're looking to increase the budget for that project from $3.4 million to $6.98, an increase of $3.58 million. In addition to that, we are requesting an adjustment to our Parks and Recreation Trail and Rehab program. This program was approved. It's a 2-year program between 23 and 24. This was approved in the 23-24 budget. However, it was approved under the funding source of grant. And we did apply for that grant and were rejected for it. And so as a result of that, we're looking to continue that project, but under the capital reserve as opposed to the grant program.
Can you explain the part where we need more money to optimize the project? I understand the inflation part, but the part where we're making it bigger, maybe Managing Director Bohan.
Thank you, Your Worship. Actually, we've got a number of elements on this program. This is one of the oldest areas in the city. Some of the infrastructure there is 1915 vintage, or 1912 vintage, 1913, sorry. And our plan is to repurpose one block section of pipe. It's currently a high pressure water pipe. We're going to repurpose that for low pressure and be able to eliminate the need to go back in and replace the 1913 vintage water pipe. That's one piece. Another component is, so that'll reduce us going back into that same road at some point in the future. So we're going to save some capital funding down the road. The other component of that is anticipation of further growth on the east side of the tracks. By again opening up the roadway now as part of this project and upsizing the size of the pipe. When we do put the pipe in the ground, that's going to help us avoid having to go back in and open it as the River Flats area begins to grow.
And so when do we expect this project will go out for RFP?
We're in the process right now of developing the engineering and design for 2 blocks. In fact, we're almost complete that part of the process, and we will go to RFP for the construction of the first 2 blocks, which is 5th Street to halfway between 6th and South Railway. We expect to do that work next year, so we'll be issuing that for RFP, that section, early next year.
Thank you.
Thank you, Managing Director Bohan. I will mention as well that we have one additional major operating item that didn't make the slides. We only found out about this one today, but we will be including this in the November 20th regular council meeting. So I just wanted to make you aware of it. We'll be requesting $305,000 in order to perform marketing engagement and initial study for the Parks and Recreation facilities for the future program. Okay. So just a recap of...
Sorry, Councillor Van Dyke? Oh, okay.
Very close, actually, just doing a recap. So the recap for what we just discussed, again, no key budget assumption changes. We continue to achieve those broad objectives that have been set by council. We're looking to reduce the municipal budget gap by $1 million. These budget adjustments are required in order to reflect the current environment, and they support a financially sustainable and livable community. And from a recommendation perspective, we are recommending that council approve the amended municipal 2024 operating budget, approve the amended 2024 municipal and utilities capital budget and municipal MOE budget, and approve the amended 2023-2024 capital funding sources.
Councillor Van Dyke.
Thank you, through the chair. I'm wondering, I have, I think only 2 questions that are unrelated. Can I just work through? Okay, thank you. I'm wondering if, I'm not on public services anymore, and I'm not super familiar with the trail infrastructure program, and I'm wondering if someone could just give me a brief synopsis on what is included in that project.
Through the chair to Councillor Van Dyke, the trail rehabilitation program is a part of our overall maintenance on our 155 kilometers of trail network that exists within the Heritage Trail system. So every year there is some sections of rehabilitation. Interestingly enough, we were refused grant funding, so we're asking for a capital reserve to continue that. We were able to receive a small amount of grant funding to work on the Trans-Canada Trail portion of the Heritage Trail Network. So that was a good news story that we weren't expecting. So we did, it's outside of this scope of work, but it deals with the slope rehabilitation on the trail that runs along the river in the northwest. But the overall project is part of our annual trail rehabilitation of those 150 kilometers of trail.
Thank you. My second question is about the investment contracted and general services versus the investment income. So we're looking at revising the budget because of an additional $4.247 million, but the additional expense that comes with that is 1.38. And I'm just wondering is that standard? Does that mean every time we make an additional 4.2 million, we have 1.3 million in expenses?
Through the chair to Councillor Van Dyke, thank you for the question. Investment income can sometimes be a complicated matter, and appreciate the opportunity to kind of sort some of that out. So with the increase in our portfolio balance, we are anticipating to see additional management fees. Our assumption for management fees is that the fees will approximate about 0.56% of our total portfolio balance. And so that'll give you an idea, if we do increase the size of that pot, what we are anticipating as far as management fees go.
Councillor Canodal?
Thank you, Mayor Clark. Through the chair to Aaron, or do you have a title?
Aaron's good.
To Aaron. Thank you, Aaron. So I'm just curious about the 30.6 million increase in electric generation sales, and if that considers the cap that we recently implemented. I'll stop there.
Through the chair, I believe that my colleague will be up very shortly, and he will provide information about the electric generation. But thank you for the question.
Sorry, I jumped the gun. I just have a list. I would started with that one. Okay. Yep, they're all related to energy. So I will just pause and wait.
Councillor Dumanowski?
Through the chair, thank you for the presentation. I just a couple of 2 or 3 questions. One, when I look at slide 5, and it includes some of the changes that are anticipated in the proposed changes for and impacts to 2024 operating budget, HALO financial support is bundled in with a number of other operational costs. If I'm wrong, but I would have thought, or my first thought would have been that a HALO financial support would just be a donation out of reserves as an kind of an in-kind versus an operational line. And maybe I got it wrong, but can you answer that for me or explain that for me?
Through the chair, in the approval that was provided by this council, you were correct in saying that it was funded in 2023 through a through a reserve transfer. However, what we're representing up here is the net impact that it would have to 2024. The funding source is undefined.
Okay, number 2, going back to the Third Street project, there's an increase of 3.8 million, and I think it's been explained well. And certainly I'm drawing from the air at this moment from the standpoint of my memory recall, but I'm curious around the original approved budget. Was the scope we've been told has changed, but $1 million, when I think about some of the proposed budgets we had for Second Street, and those projects were done some years ago, I'm guessing they were in the 2 million range per block. So I'm curious, the original approved budget and or the broader scope. So help me understand why 1 million initially, and what are is it the actual, we're doing more blocks, or is it the scope of the intended project that has changed, or both?
Through the chair, I'll pass that one on to Managing Director Bohan.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So there was 4 pieces, if you want to call it this. There was the the abandonment of the high-pressure water line and repurposing that as a lower-pressure water line. That's one change in scope, that we repurposing one block to abandon that 1913 vintage pipe. And then the longer-term plan to increase the diameter of the pipe and provide for future growth. There was also $1 million that for our surface repair, because we're splitting this project between the two departments, Municipal Works and Environmental Utilities. When we did the budget last year, we were under severe pressure and financially fit pressures to try and drive costs down. So we went through the process of evaluating what we thought would be the estimated cost based on the scope of work we did 2 years prior. And when we came back, we had initially thought that we might be able to cut the scope back for Third Street. And as it turned out that we're going to need to do that additional scope. And that just essentially is some additional work with surface features as it relates to repairs, surface work on that first two blocks. This is not the subsequent blocks further west of 5th.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Okay, I'll save my thoughts, but I appreciate the explanation. Lastly, the overall reduction of $1 million or so on the municipal budget gap. So was that, and I'm assuming to some extent unanticipated, but was there always a plan? I guess there's always a plan. I'm answering my own questions, but the $1 million toward the bigger end is movement in the right direction. It still leaves us, as you have indicated, with a $5 million delta to start, at least at this point in the next budget cycle. I'm wondering, in light of the influx of revenue that is helping shape a lot of this in a favorable way, is that moving the needle? Was that moving of the needle unanticipated? Is that a gift to ourselves in the sense that we were fortunate and we're able to move the needle $1 million more than we had ever thought we would be able to do? And yet, in light of the revenues that we've enjoyed, I gotta be careful which word I use, the revenues that we've increased by, it seems, it stands to, from my maybe simplistic view, as even a greater obstacle to close that $5 million gap, because the chances of us duplicating anything like we've seen this last year, and we're only able to move that needle $1 million, gives me some trepidation toward closing that gap even more in the subsequent budget. So was this even anticipated at all? I'm assuming we always look for opportunities. So, but was this a nice surprise? And then what kind of conclusion does it help us derive as far as the next budget cycle and trying to close that gap even more? If that's even a fair question, but that's kind of my question.
Through the chair, thank you, Councillor Dumanowski, for the question. Primarily, the increase that we've experienced is due to that investment revenue, which is a result of higher portfolio balances that we are holding within the municipality. So in a way that I think some of that was unexpected, up and beyond what we were anticipating for the year. However, in the previous budget cycle back in December, we had provided a 2-year budget with a 2-year forecast. And as a part of that forecast, we did provide a path to balance. We were anticipating in that period that we would be nearing that balance within the 25-26 position. So as far as the increased revenue goes, I think that only helps to serve our ability to balance within the next few years.
Councillor Hirsch.
Series of questions, Your Worship, thank you. So I do have a few, and they're going to be kind of all over the map because of the presentation, but thank you for the presentation. I just want to focus my first question on the grants. You showed grants and then reduced taxes, that the province initiated in lieu of taxes. So we do understand that you'd indicated that there's a plus 600,000 from the province for our operation. So what, out of the whole maneuvering of the shells, if you will, what's the net difference, what we get from the province? Is it in the positive or is it in the negative? And approximately how much is that? The net from grants to?
Through the chair, if I understand the question correctly, the 417,000 that we received for MSI operating is a net benefit to the city. We're not recommending that additional expenses increase to offset that. That's supposed to cover lost revenues that the city has incurred as a result of provincial download. So for that component, for sure, that is a net benefit to the city. With regard to the other grants, the net impact is shown here on page 9 of the briefing note. Under note 2, we have a section called other grants, and the net impact of those grants is approximately $100,000. $100,000 positive, I believe.
So when you talk about our provincial buildings that usually had taxes to them, they got reduced by order of the province.
That's right.
Do you know, is that a tangible number? That's what I'm getting at. Do you follow what I'm saying now?
Through the chair, if I understand correctly, you're asking about the lost revenues.
Yeah.
Well, it's hard to completely define. I would put that estimate somewhere between $1 and $2 million that we have lost as a result of the changes that have happened in the provincial government.
So 1 to 2 million shortfall in payment in lieu of taxes. And then an increase from them of the 407. I'm just trying to arrive on the net and maybe illustrate that we get less support from the province is what I'm getting at. And maybe that's an easier question to answer. Is our support from the provincial government less than ever before?
Through the chair, with regard to these changes that have happened with the provincial government and the increase for MSI, there has been a net decrease to support from the province. There's also capital funding that we receive from the province as well, which isn't represented in the numbers here. And I don't have the figures in front of me to discuss this at that time, but there have been changes there as well.
But the capital projects would be based on application for funding and stuff, is that fair? I'm looking for an understanding in terms of our net operating. That's probably a question I'm gonna ask at council, to be honest. I think it's just important for, taxpayers to know what that would look like, but
If you don't mind, Managing Director Egert
Certainly,
wanted to
go ahead.
weigh in.
Okay, and through the chair, Councillor Hirsch, as it relates to the capital grant program, the province of Alberta is just in the process of revamping that entire program. So what we know today as the MSI capital piece, that's going to change to become the LGFF, the Local Government Fiscal Framework. That'll happen in the provincial year 24-25. So
Okay.
When we bring forward the 25-26 budget, we'll be reflecting what that new program looks like. What we anticipate, when you look over the last few years, and I'm going to use rough numbers, we'll have some exact numbers for November 20th. We've enjoyed approximately $12 million a year of capital grants. Overall, the funding pot for mid-sized municipalities will be reduced by about $25 million. So we don't know the allocation formula yet, but if you apply that 25% reduction to us, 25% of 12 million is $3 million. So that is a big impact for us. And when you look at some of the things that Managing Director Bohan is illustrating through some of the road works and underground works, that's $3 million less a year. And we don't know the allocation formulas. It could be more, it could be less.
Yeah, and I appreciate that because that's an important point to be made, is that we do try to maintain service levels with less. So appreciate that.
Can I just and I know City Manager Mitchell wants to weigh in. Could it be reframed like the question for next council meeting, the stable funding we receive from the province?
Sure.
Or like not the one-off grants that we,
Yeah, no, not the one-off grants. I mean, that's something you apply for, and that sort of thing. I'm just saying net operating assistance in lieu of grants versus taxes to properties, et cetera, that would have been reduced. I just
City-
need to understand that.
City Manager Mitchell?
Thank you through the chair. Just to follow up on Managing Director Egert's comments, the provincial government has guaranteed that the LGFF for 2024 will be stable, so that we have that for 1 year. But then they've indicated the change will come in 2025, and I know you outlined that, but I just wanted to highlight that. They have given no indication further than the 2024. So as he has stated, once we find out the allocation, that'll help us. But I think I understand what you're asking for. It's an overall of, here's the stable funding, here's over the years, and I've done that in the past, and I think we can easily get that for the next council meeting.
So thank you for that.
I think it would be helpful.
Yeah, appreciate that. I guess I'm just a little bit worried as well on the LGFF based on a little bit of comments saying that they're going to tie what they, on their budget allocation is based on the success of their operation. So if they went up 3%, great. If they went stagnant or if they went down, so our funding won't be as stable as one might think. So just needed to understand that. If I can, Your Worship. You indicate a 1 million MCAF increase. That might be a sticky point for me, only in the fact that I know the iteration of MCAF and how the development of that. I'm just wondering, given a dramatic, I mean, I reflect back 2018 when we were in the throes of accelerated financially fit, when we were looking at things. You know, when I look at that, that's $1 million to the ratepayer, but yet we got 4% to the taxpayer. So just want to have that, maybe that discussion. So, you know, if we talk about you bridge the gap of $1 million, but yet I see an MCAF increase of $1 million, then that's kind of where my thoughts are going to go. So more to that, I guess. I do have a question in regards to that 3rd Street capital project again. And it's not really more budget related, it's the start. I just drove by there tonight. It's been ripped up. I've actually received emails saying to businesses have been impacted. So this project that you speak to, is that the one that's in play right now, or is there gonna more to come as far as development or changes there? Because I think there's a lot of fatigue in that neighborhood. And just wanted to understand, when you talk about savings of the cut, so I presume of the 3 million addition, that we're gonna, in terms of ripping up the road again, we're gonna offset that 3 million easily by saving our next involvement, and quite frankly, the pain and suffering of that sort of development to the local neighborhood. Is that fair?
Yes, go ahead, Managing Director Bohan.
Thank you, Your Worship. The 3rd Street project you're speaking of is actually on the other side of the railroad tracks. That's on the Maple side.
Oh, okay.
And that's a pressure relief valve project that's been ongoing for, sad to say, a long time over the summer. This is on the west side.
Oh, okay.
It's between 5th Avenue and about halfway by where the back lane is behind or beside the Assiniboia. And in terms of the future savings, we're speculating that there will be future growth in the River Flats area. And in the interest of not going back to increase the size of the pipe at some point in the future, I can't put a date on when that growth may come, but we're anticipating that put it in now, if we're going to disrupt it once. Just maybe, if I may, Your Worship, extend the comments. We've already begun discussions with the Downtown Collective, advising them what's coming, the scope of what the work will be. We're not finished communicating with them, but that is something that we're going to have and continue for the, basically all through the winter and into early next year. We're very sensitive to the community and in particular, the folks that are impacted by these necessary works.
I appreciate it. The other piece is the mention in the future budgets that we want to get to a balanced budget. And it's funny, Dennis, Managing Director Egert, over the years, we've had a little debate over do we really need to have a balanced budget? And before people go, part of the argument was when we get to about 6 million of a shortfall, which is the equivalent of 1%, is 800,000. So you do the math, and it's roughly 7, 8, 9 to 10% savings on taxes that is contributed by our Comco. I guess the question becomes, which we've talked about for a few years now, is a $6 or $7 million budget shortfall provided by our Comco, is that generally accepted to be something that could be sustainable? And people really, when we get to the budget, even recently, when we talk about the value of Comco in general, I think people do not understand that we, when in our budget shortfall, we actually use the reserve to balance the budget. And I guess the point that I want to illustrate is that something we can continue with rather than going to a full balanced budget, because to get there, it means somehow, some way, there's going to be a potential tax increase. So going back to, we've got this Comco, and what's the value of it going forward? So I don't know if that's a discussion for today or the future. I know it's in future budgets, and maybe I'll reserve that there, but I just wanted to kind of put that out there. So, thank you.
Do you have comments on that? Maybe, no? Okay. Heritage Fund. Are we planning on doing an extra amount? What does that look like for this year?
So Mayor Clark, for this budget update presentation, there is no endowment from the Heritage Fund for 2024. What we would like to do is for 25-26 is present several options for what the endowment could be used for. And there's several approaches that we could do in terms of where that endowment goes. Does it go into general revenues? Does it go for special type of projects, one-off projects? Is it used for incentives, for some sort of growth for this area? So we have some ideas that we want to present to council in for 25-26. I believe that that's a very strategic discussion that council should have. Once we start drawing on the Heritage Saving Reserve endowment, where should that be used?
Thank you. My question was more, we, by policy, are required to invest a certain amount, percentage of our free cash flow at the end of the year to the Heritage Fund. Is there an intention to increase that amount? Or what would that look like in an effort to close the budget gap? Maybe quicker or?
So I'll start, and maybe Lola Barta would have some supplementary comments to this. We have accelerated the funding of that fund in addition to what our dividend policy states. For example, in 2023, we had actually funded an additional $50 million to the fund. This particular year, what we're forecasting is just the formula as driven by the dividend policy. So we don't have anything contemplated for anything above and beyond that amount. We're forecasting a balance in the Heritage Fund just shy of $200 million. And so that $200 million and into the future would be available for endowment that we're proposing start in 2025.
Councillor Knodel?
Thank you, Mayor Clark. Would this section be an appropriate time to ask a question about the police budget, or am I still off track?
I think that they will be, no, they're not a separate presentation. I don't know. Okay. go
I'm
for it.
just wondering if you could expand on the oversight that happened with the police budget this, yeah. I don't have good words tonight, but
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor Knoll, thank you for the question. As I mentioned before, primarily the Medicine Hat Police and Association, they've been in negotiation since 2020. As a result, we had to make an estimate of what we thought the budgets would result in, and unfortunately, our estimates were low. We had only anticipated from the 2020 budget an increase of about 2%. In hindsight, it likely should have been more. However, that's creating the gap that we're seeing now and what we're proposing to close with this budget amendment.
All right, so there are briefing notes in here, but they make recommendations to approve the budgets. So I think we'll take those for information at this time rather than approving anything. I don't see any further questions on this, but stay close just in case. Oh, no, I didn't see her put up her hand. Councillor Robbins?
Oh, I don't have any questions. Thank you, Mayor Clark.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll pass it over to Travis Tucksher.
Good evening. Tonight I'm here to present the Commodity-Based Business Unit Budget, also known as COMCO. Just to start, overall, this is a good news story as compared to our original budget for 2024. As shown in some previous slides, we are expecting an EBITDA, earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization, increase of about 26 million. So just a quick agenda of what we'll go through tonight for the COMCO budget. We'll look at the current activities and some opportunities in these business units. We'll look at some key changes to the budget. We'll look back at 2023 and what is the outlook for 2024. And we'll have the summary of the operations and capital budgets, and then followed by the recommendation. So some current activities and opportunities for the business unit. One of the largest areas that we can add value is to optimize our power assets. That's making sure we have reliable assets that can take advantage of market opportunities. Another area that we're looking to provide value is to continue the AR, shallow gas AR program, abandonment and reclamation program. From a volume standpoint, we do expect steady electric and gas load in the city. So what are some key changes for the commodities budget? Well, the biggest one is obviously price. Price drives a lot of impacts throughout the budget. It changes our volumes in terms of how many volumes go to the power pool, changes our pilot, changes our carbon costs. So it does have a huge impact. But we have adjusted all different line items that are impacted by price and volumes. So if we look back at 2023, prices have remained high, however, not quite as high as 2022. This has created a lot of volatility and provided some value for us into selling into the pool. It is also significantly higher than we budgeted. Previously, we budgeted about $95 for 2023, and we're expecting this price to settle in around $140 for 2023, dollars per megawatt hour. On the gas side, gas prices have decreased. We originally budgeted approximately $5.20. Prices to date are about $2.75 a GJ. Lots of this is due to lower than expected demand, as well as some LNG exports delays with a Freeport. It's a LNG facility that was down for portions of the year, and also warmer temperatures in North America. So the outlook for 2024, still expecting a strong price in 2024, but nowhere near the highs of 2022 and 2023. The budget price is approximately $91 a megawatt hour for 2024. Natural gas, we are seeing slight increases. There is a result of a few different aspects, one being peaking power plants, gas peaking power plants that will be used to meet peaking load. There's also some increased supply in Alberta and Canada, but the ability to take it away from Alberta is causing some issues and keeping the price tied to the rest of North America. So this is probably the biggest slide or the most important slide of the presentation. As I mentioned, gas has decreased from the original budget forecast from $4.59 to $3.13. Our power prices increased by 17% from $77.66 to $90.66. For a power plant, our input cost is natural gas, and our output cost is obviously the power price. So our input costs are decreasing, and our forecasted input costs are decreasing, and the forecasted sales price is expected to increase to $91. So both those pieces have added value for our electric generation assets. However, there is a slight decrease to our gas production, obviously with the lower forecasted natural gas sales price. So if we look at the operating budget update, as I mentioned earlier, we are expecting an increase of about $26.5 million to our EBITDA. And as I mentioned previously, natural gas prices play a role both on the revenues side for our natural gas production business and our input costs for our Genco business. So although natural gas prices are decreasing revenue slightly on the natural gas production side, it's having a bigger impact in terms of net decrease in our expenses. And obviously the higher sales price on the electricity side is also having a large impact. On the tangible capital asset budget, not a huge change. We are asking for $500,000 more. This is in regards to two projects, one being a fire system upgrade and the other being a Unit 11 hot section that is anticipated to cost $300,000 more. Two other unique items for this budget that we're going to cover. HatSmart funding. As you're aware, HatSmart provides rebate for our customers for energy efficiency programs. This program is funded through the energy conservation charge and typically provides about $300,000 in available funds for this program. This program has been fully subscribed for the last few years, and we are proposing that we add an extra $100,000 to this program from Nature's Best Reserve, which was funded from previous customer energy conservation charge revenues. And then lastly, but very important, we are asking for a bylaw amendment for the natural gas side of things, and we are replicating a similar approach to what we did or just got approved October 16th. So we're asking for a single natural gas rate for the interim period until the Comco business review is done. This is a little bit slightly different than electric because we purchase, I would say, well, for our electric generation assets, we purchase all of our gas, and there's a small portion of our retail base that is served by our own production, but I would say 90% of our gas is purchased off the market. So we are looking at basing this price on our actual cost to purchase gas in the market, plus procurement charges and a very small return margin. So that would mimic a buy-in period prior to the month. That buy-in period to buy the forecasted gas costs would then be passed along to the customers. So In this case, it is a wholesale price, but it's also our cost, so that's where it's slightly different than electricity. And then recap and what our recommendations are, approval of the operating and capital budget for 2024, and then the approval of the gas bylaw, which would need a first reading, and then also after the non-statutory public hearing would need second and third readings. Happy to take any questions.
Can you go back one slide?
Yep.
So, sorry, 2 slides. So we're not going to be making any profit on gas?
No, it's,
Sorry, can I rephrase? I
Yeah.
apologize, I said it like that. So we have capital costs, future costs, transition costs that we know we have to keep up our system and make sure that we're like a functioning unit going into the future. Are those costs built into the cost of the price of gas for our customers?
so the gas price will be built based off our purchase cost, which will be the market price. So any production from that business unit will receive market price. So the portion that we do produce ourselves and sell either to our customers will be at market price. And there won't be a guaranteed, similar to electric, there's no guaranteed return on that. It's a market price, a wholesale market price.
Thank you, Councillor Knodel.
Thank you, Mayor Clark. Through the chair to Travis, I have a couple questions. The first one was already asked, but hopefully you can help me with it. So 30.6 million increase in electric generation sales, does that consider the newly imposed cap that we placed just at our last meeting?
So
I have more too.
this budget was created prior to that. After reviewing the budget and the cap that was proposed at the last council meeting, I don't anticipate any large variances from imposing that cap. So did I go back and adjust the budget? Not that way, but I didn't expect, from what I've looked at, I didn't expect to see any major reason to go ahead and adjust it.
So we will still have an increase in sales despite that cap.
Yeah, and that increase is from the original 2024 budget. And like I said, the original budget was priced at $77 versus now the increase of about 17%, 17% or 25%, I can't remember, but it was due to price increase.
Thank you. Is there an unofficial way that we account for reclamation costs? I know that it doesn't exist within our standard budgeting process. It's outside of that, if I'm not mistaken. And how can we regularly communicate those expenses in a standardized, predictable way to the residents?
Good question. We do have calculations that are updated for estimated abandonment and reclamation obligations. I'm not familiar with how the process works to communicate those to the residents, but we do calculate it and look at our assets and what we've disposed of or abandoned, and then recalculate what our obligation is. But I'm not familiar with the process to communicate it.
Okay, do you think that could be something that we could simplify, and at very minimum that we could receive that simplified information or that list of information so we can effectively communicate that to residents?
Yeah, definitely happy to take it through city manager and managing director Pancoast and come back with their preferred approach for that.
Awesome. Is the transfer to the municipal side, I think this is my last one, is the financial transfer from the to the municipal side a once a year, one-time transfer, or does the transfer happen incrementally as needed? And how does the municipal side communicate with Comco to ensure that there is a balanced budget?
So I'll have Lola correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding of the dividend policy is that Comco is looked at as a business unit, and the free cash flow from Comco is then taken one time at the end of the year and given over to the municipal side to fill capital reserves, heritage reserves, and kind of has the three-step process of how the dividend funds are put into different buckets of funds, but it is once a year at the end of the year is my understanding.
final last question about that is, and that this is me just learning as I go, any free cash flow beyond the project requirements or abandoned requirements of Comco fully displaces into the municipal budget? Is that correct?
So the abandonment and reclamation future obligations are not taken off that. If that was your question, the future abandonment reclamation are not taken off that.
Okay.
But the current years
That's
are
what I
taken
meant.
off that.
Okay, thank you so much.
Councillor Van Dyke?
Thank you. Through the chair, I just had one question, and you touched on this briefly. If you could maybe expand on the Nature's Best Reserve that money will be pulled from for HatSmart. I'm not familiar with that reserve, and I'm wondering how that came to be and the decision about bringing that money into HatSmart.
Yeah, so this is a reserve that's been in place for a while at the city. There is a remaining balance, and from all indications I've been given is this has been funded through previous energy conservation charges, and the balance that is remaining in this fund will be used for additional HatSmart funds to look at energy efficiency programs. Or sorry, projects, not programs.
Thank you. And so is there an expectation, I know it's reviewed every year, but is there an expectation that HatSmart may expand with additional funds, or it will just, the funds will be used to meet the current needs? I also know it becomes fully subscribed very quickly when it's announced in the start of the year.
So we don't have large changes to the program itself. We're just looking at adding funding to the program.
And so when arriving at the $100,000, what does that actually mean for residents? Because I am assuming once it's fully subscribed, we don't keep track of like everyone else that's applying to it. So there's a number of programs in there. What kind of tangibly can we expect that will be additional number of people who get solar panels, or is there a way of describing it that made the $100,000 the right number?
I would like to say there was a little more scientific work done to that, but obviously there's different pieces to that program and different payouts depending on what you do. So we just had felt that, that's a 33% increase to the budget, and that hopefully would take off some of that oversubscription. But to say that there was a hard number that was calculated, I wouldn't say it's that way. It's just what we felt was a number that would help take away some of that people that are being turned away from that program.
So is there, say for solar panels, for example, what amount would an applicant get if they were successfully applied to HatSmart for solar panels?
I'm a little bit away from that program. I'll get some more details for the next council meeting for you on that program. I don't want to say a number and then look silly.
That's totally fair. I don't see any further questions. Okay. All right, I think that brings us to the Medicine Hat Public Library. Thank you, Travis, very much. Welcome. Thanks. And you have the floor whenever you are ready.
Okay. Well, hello, everybody, Mayor Clark, city councilors. My name is Megan Hilgendorf, and I am co-chair of the Public Library Board. I'm joined tonight by our chief librarian, Ken Fazer, and we are grateful to be here with you today to present our 2024 appropriation request.
Now let's see if I can operate this thing. Hooray, it worked. Maybe. There we go. So last year, we came before council and described 2023, the year coming up, as being a year to study and to experiment and basically figure out what was needed in the community post-COVID. We did that, and what we found was in 2023, our usage really bounced back. Our building is busy again. We're back to new normal levels of programming, circulation, and use of our services. We found in 2023 that safety is a major issue for us. We did again, that comes with people back in the building again. And so we did do a major study of this. We involved the board, staff, and management in doing this study and came up with a plan of action. And one of the things that we found we needed were guards. And we have hired guards or contracted guards from our reserve funds, and we've been doing that for a while now. A big community need that we identified in 2023 was youth mental health, and we feel that we have the mandate and the opportunity to respond to that effectively. And we constructed a new youth room, the Honeycomb House, where we'll do programming. And the other thing that we found was, again, returning to new normal levels of services and people back in the building and the services thriving again, is that some cuts that we made during Financially Fit, particularly to our ability to backfill for staffing absences, was really starting to show as we were getting busy again. And so we tapped into our reserves again to backfill, to pay for that backfilling.
So our priorities for 2024 include family and youth services, hosting family days on Sundays, as Ken mentioned, and our new youth advocate, who will be facilitating activities and therapeutic listening in our new Honeycomb House teen space. The library needs security. Due to an increase of incidents between patrons and staff and vulnerable populations, we have found, after having a security presence in the library in 2023, that guards improve staff and patron perception of safety. We have been thanked by multiple patrons for their presence. We have asked for funding to provide contracted security guards or an internal staff equivalent. In 2024, we are excited about connecting with the community. Our board is going to create a new strategic plan that includes engaging the public on ways we can improve services, including service access. We also hope to participate in facilities for the future planning to explore whether the library might play a role in a future recreational facility in the south side of the city.
I'm so glad that number is right. We had a couple drafts of this. So our request in 2024 is for $2,627,106. This is a significant increase over 2023. It's $367,000, $372,957, 17% over 2023, and we do acknowledge that's a significant increase.
Unavoidable increases. $162,690 of our requested increase can be tied directly to increased costs that we cannot avoid. This, of course, includes inflation that we have seen over the last few years. It also includes a new collective agreement that we just negotiated for our staff, other costs such as WCB, and an increase in our utilities and the defined amounts that we pay to the city for things like building and ground maintenance.
In addition to those unavoidable increases, we consider security guards to be really essential. We have noticed an increase in disorder post-COVID for many reasons, I'm sure, but it really has impacted our facility. And we have had some, no tragedies or anything like that, but some just unacceptable interactions have happened in our building, and we really require those security guards to keep everybody both safe and also to keep the perception of safety for everyone. We have, as I say, we've already started having guards in the building. We're paying for that out of our reserves. And we've also done some minor renovations to some of our facilities. We now have locks on our bathroom doors that we're able to not have completely open access to them. And I would mention that people or guards are only part of the solution for this. We do anticipate a major project upgrading our washrooms next year, which, again, we expect to pay for that out of reserves.
High priority increases. 113,000 of the requested increase is for what we consider high priority needs. This includes funding for one full-time equivalent, the word left my brain, in new social services positions. This will partially protect the grant-funded social worker position from any loss of funding and will support the new youth advocate position, which will support youth and facilitate program out of our new Honeycomb House, as mentioned. We have replaced some previously cut funding to allow us to call in staff to replace absences due to vacation, illness, or other leaves. We eliminated almost all funding for this in response to financially fit funding cuts, which made it difficult sometimes to staff all of our service desks and deliver scheduled programming.
I'm going to talk about the rest in just a minute, but I'd like to just mention about that full-time equivalent for the social service position. What that is we have two positions that we're interested in with what we're calling social services. One is the social worker position, which already exists, and then we have a new youth advocate position, which is going to be working out of that Honeycomb House, that new room in the library. And we do have funding, and we expect to maintain funding for the social worker, but it's out of our control. That's through Medicine Hat Community Housing, and all signs are good, but we don't control that. So having this funding for what we're calling full-time equivalent, we can allocate more of it to the youth advocate if our funding comes through, and if we had a problem with that funding for the social worker, then we can route some of that money that way. So we feel this gives us the ability to just adjust, to what happens with the funding and protect what we have and add on more if we're able. So then just to mention the last bit of increase is for just small line item increases. We do expect that we're going to need to do some refreshing of computers next year, and we need to support staff use of phones, a couple other little things. That's the last 14,616.
So for a multi-year perspective, municipal funding of our library hit a historic peak in 2018. After that, as with many city-funded services, funding was cut as a part of the Financially Fit initiative. In response to that, the library cut hours by about 15%, eliminated a management position, and cut call-in shift replacement funds.
Just to mention that we do receive money from some other places. Libraries are a municipal service in Alberta, and the municipality is definitely our main funder. We do get some money from other sources. The Government of Alberta provides us with an operating grant, and that's essentially an automatic grant with a preset amount. It goes to every library in Alberta. We receive generous donations from the community, which we're grateful for. We receive a lot of small donations, which I think is a great show of support for us. And we typically save those or allocate those for visible upgrades to equipment and services that are community focused and, as I say, visible to the community. As I mentioned, our social workers, and we also have a casual cash employment program where marginalized people get employment in the library, and that has great impacts, which I could talk about. Those are funded by Medicine Hat Community Housing. And the library, as an independent organization, does have financial reserves. We have a few uses for those, which I can get into if you're interested. We do draw on reserves for projects. In 2023, our reserves funded construction of the Honeycomb House. $25,000 went towards programming expenses, and that's a year-over-year thing that we do every year. We did some reconciliation activities. We did a major lighting upgrade, and there were a few other projects as well. And as I mentioned, in 2024, we do expect to use reserves for a major washroom upgrade. We'll continue to use them to cover some of our programming expenses, and we have a couple other initiatives in mind.
So to conclude, thank you for your ongoing funding of the library, for excellent city maintenance of our building, including our gardens. I have to say, they were the best I think I've ever seen them, for your support of our activities, and for considering this request.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Councillor Knodel?
Thank you, Mayor Clark. To both our presenters this evening, thank you for being here. Your presentation is appreciated. I'm just curious about a couple line items. The first is sorry, I'm just losing my track. Your patron fines and fees. You know what? Give me 30 seconds to reset my brain. Okay, so library membership fees is what I'm looking at. It is on page 63 under the first section. So your library membership fees, the projected 2023 numbers are 7,100, but the budgeted line item was 20,000. I'm just wondering what your logic is for continuing to hold that 20,000 for 2024 if you only made 7,100 this year.
That's a great question. Thank you. Through the chair. We actually don't charge individuals for cards anymore. Those of you who use the library have probably noticed that. And what we did with that is we created a fundraising initiative, Library Card for Every Hatter, which basically lets individuals or people donate small or large amounts of money to cover the cost of cards for others. I really like this program because it's a real movement in Alberta libraries to have free cards, and actually Alberta is one of the few jurisdictions that even allows for charging of cards. This is not the norm in most public libraries. So it's really a direction we wanted to move in, but we also, don't want to look like we're turning up our nose at funding, and it's hard to let, we traditionally made about 20,000 a year with our cards. So when we came up with that initiative, we set the old levels of income as our goal for that fundraising, and we've done pretty well at it. It's been very popular. We've had turnover in our position that controls that or manages that, so we didn't really do as well this year as I would have hoped, but I do expect I see a lot of room for growth with this, so I hope that we get back to that 20,000.
Thank you, Ken. That makes great sense. And in regards to, through the chair, if you don't mind, in regards to interest, that's related to your fund, your savings, correct? Or am I misreading?
Yes, through the chair. This is an interesting one because I just realized how hard it is while doing this work. We don't actually have an accountant on staff, and it's hard to do these things sometimes. So our interest, we got a lot this year because, of course, the rates are going up, and we had GICs that matured that we had at good rates, so we did pretty well this year for interest. And when we set the number for 2024, we looked at the timetable of when our GICs and investments were maturing, and there's just not much coming up in 2024, so the number is low. That might not be best practice accounting-wise because we do, we'll be earning the interest, it just won't be cash in our hands. So that number, I'm not sure whether that's the right way to present that number or not, but that's how we came up with it.
Thank you very much. And just a final comment, I do appreciate, and I will probably say this indefinitely until I'm not in this chair, but I appreciate your ability to shapeshift and adjust to the needs of the community beyond what we the mental framework of what I imagine a library to look like. I appreciate that you are meeting the needs of all people in our community, including those that are most vulnerable. And I'm really eager to see how you problem solve the washroom situation. I know Ken and I talked about this, and it's not an easy task. I think the locks make sense currently, and guards make sense right now. But I'm eager to support your work and eager to see the direction you head and new ideas that come the community's way. So thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Dumanowski.
Through the chair, quick question. Thank you for the presentation. I'm just curious on slide or page 60, I don't know, that's what it's on our the multi-year perspective, so maybe 3 slides before this, where you reference the 2018 city appropriation and adjusted in 2023 dollars. So, and obviously your current request is higher, but it's, when you look at that consideration, it's not much higher, as you've indicated. So I'm curious then, just in general terms, are you, because you spoke to some enhancements and improvements and additions against that total. So would you say then, if you were to kind of remove those momentarily and look back to the 2018 appropriation, would you say then you've taken some things out and added some new things in place? Or, because it appears to me you're doing some magical things with dollars here. So just, can you speak to that in general? Are you subtracting some things to add some things, or have you done something that isn't immediately visible to me?
Well, life was a little easier then in some ways. I guess, just in terms of managing, we're definitely thrifty these days. I think the major change is that we did drop a management position when we went through the financially fit process. And we went from, I think, 7 to 6, if I remember the numbers right, depending on who you count as manager or out of scope. So that was a pretty significant change. And I would say, we really do feel the bottleneck in terms of, number of managers. It is an organizational capacity issue, but we're getting by, I guess I would say, with one less manager. And part of again, what we're asking for, the replacement of the backfill money. We used to have about 70,000 in our budget for basically covering, again, vacations and, basically calling people in. And that went down to almost 0. And now what we're asking for is to go back up to about 30,000. So it's still a reduction. That does make things difficult. For example, we have plans in place, to shut service desk in even areas of the library if we have to, if we have multiple people off sick, if we had the flu run through the staff or something, we would be in a bit of trouble. So we're coming partially back from that, but we're not back to where we were. If I may just mention too, to explain the cost of living analysis, I basically went on the Bank of Canada website, typed in 2018 numbers and what are they worth in 2023. That was the methodology.
I don't see, Councillor Hirsch.
It just popped in my head with the comment that Mr. Fieser made regards to the unavoidable increases. You talk about inflation, utilities, et cetera. So what were the numbers that you used on the inflation pieces, knowing that we think we got utilities a little bit captured now? Inflation, I know, was high earlier on, and I think that's been, the argument's going to be is that we're in maybe for a soft landing or a bit of a recession. So I just needed to know what was your inputs on the inflation piece for the, because at 162,690, so I appreciate that, and there's collective agreements in there as well. Just need to understand kind of what the input numbers were there, that's all.
Thank you. Through the chair, this was a line-by-line analysis. There was no global analysis, no adding of a number to an overall number, and I wouldn't even say it's comprehensive. It was really the major budget lines where we knew things. The city budget lines such as our insurance costs and our grounds maintenance, those kind of numbers. Those we received a defined increase to those, so we know exactly what those are. The labor increase is definitely the biggest part of that. And again, we haven't completely ratified the contract, but we have come up with an agreement. I'll just mention that it exactly mirrors the City of Medicine agreement with Local 46, is it? 43? So we know that number. That's the main place they come from. The utilities, that one is a bit more of a guess. I would say that we're at about 103,000 for this year, if I remember correctly. At this point, actually, that was end of September, and we're budgeting 150,000 total for next year. So that, of course, things could change there. Yes.
And I noted, so thank you for that. I appreciate that. I noted that you provided us an income statement, which is, I appreciate that for sure. Is there a potential for us to receive a balance sheet, or do we get that on a regular basis, or?
I would be glad to provide that at any point. As I say, we're not super strong when it comes to, we don't have an in-house accountant, but we do get audited every year. I think I've provided to the city our audited financial statements. I could certainly provide those to council.
Oh, appreciate that, and I'm sure we have it too. I just, you'd mentioned, and this is mentioned multiple times in regards to referencing the reserves that you have, and again, I appreciate, I'm always a big fan of people that are able to kind of work within their budget, and it doesn't necessarily is a reflection of wanting to know what the reserves are. I think you had mentioned that you're kind of bringing in some reserves of some regular funding. So I just don't know what that pot of money, if you will, is it short or is it long, or what position it's in? So just need to understand that. But it'd be interesting. I don't know, I guess maybe this is to the city manager. You mentioned the idea of the introduction of a social worker, and I'm just trying to understand if there's perhaps an economies of scale available to us, if there's any staff, FTE coverage, et cetera, that could be looked at as well. I know we have the school liaison and different programs that we offer as well. Just that's just kind of in my head right now.
Through the chair, if I may just respond to that, I think that partnerships are great. We would certainly be interested. At some point, I would like to talk to the chief of police and see if they'd be interested in having staff in the library at times, school resource officers, those sorts of things. I definitely think there's possibilities there. I would mention that we're actually getting a lot of referrals from the city to our social workers are getting referrals that are sent by the city around, for example, the, can't remember the name of the rebate, but the rebate that's tied to income that requires a social worker to sign off. So we are seeing folks that are being sent by the city to our social worker and many other agencies. And just to speak to the reserves, I think that's a really good question. We have total reserves. We have multiple reserves, and they total to $928,000, which is a lot for an organization of our size and our annual expenditures. Just to explain that, we have different pots. We have, for example, $50,000 that's in an insurance reserve that's basically locked down. We have that very high deductible, as do all city departments or areas. If we ever had a major problem like a flood or something, that's what we would have to pay. So we keep that separate. We keep $106,000 in a different donations reserve, which again, that's money that we've received from the community, and it's really our desire to spend that on purely very client-focused activities. One thing to note about our reserves is we have cash flow issues through the year. So for example, we have about a $150,000 bill that comes due early in January before we get any income. And at the worst, that timing problem that we have or issue results in about a $205,000 deficit at one point in the year. So I feel that we need to have, to round that up, because that's the actual number, I feel that we need to have $300,000 reserved just to deal with the cash flow that basically needs to sit there. And as I mentioned, we have started to draw on our reserves more than we have in the past, and we expect to continue doing that for capital projects such as this washroom upgrade.
Just one final. So I appreciate that, Ken. Great answers. I'm just wondering, you mentioned about the expansion in terms of programming. So is that, has there been a shift at the board level for a bit of a mandate change in regards to that as far as a directional shift, or is that some sort of a natural result of actions that have been happening that you've seen throughout the years at the library? So is it a material, thoughtful shift, or is it more reactionary?
This is a long-standing shift, and I would say it's pretty thoughtful. The board was quite involved. I don't have my strategic plan right at hand, but our mission and statement and values definitely reference that we are a community center, we're a community hub. It's one of our deep mandates is to provide a sense of community, reduce social isolation, build community, and this goes back. That's our current strategic plan was written in 2018, if I remember correctly, and this goes back before that as well. So this has been a long time coming in public libraries, that we've seen community impact, and again, community connections as being as important as information and knowledge and culture, which are kind of our traditional 20 years ago, maybe 50 years ago, traditional ground.
Thank you.
City Manager Mitchell.
Thank you through the chair. I certainly think I need to gain a greater understanding of the background and the mandate. And honestly, I haven't read the strategic plan, but I would find it interesting. I do agree it's a social hub. And I would just always caution that we have to be really careful when we're taking on what I would say traditional provincial mandates, that we're careful, that we're making sure that maybe if there is funding that we're not, we have to make sure if we're going to take something on as a city or as an entity, that we're being mindful that the funding's there or the support's there. So I think, to Councillor Hirsch's point, it would be great if we could just have a broader discussion about that to make sure that either we as the city can help lobby or work with the library on maybe some other solutions. So I'd be interested in doing that. Thank you.
Through the chair, I thank you so much, and I would add that you have a lot of experts, you have a lot more people, and I see that as being something that could be really helpful to us. So anytime we can have those conversations, I would greatly appreciate it. And I think we could do better as a result with your help. Just on the topic of, I think you were sort of talking about some of those stretch services like the social worker as being, do we want to sort of facilitate somebody else's, downsizing or something? I would just mention what I see as a more immediate risk is actually dumping of clients. And we have seen that from time to time. We've literally had people show up in very high need situations, sort of a half hour before we're about to close. Needing services that are beyond what we deliver, and to me, that's the biggest existential threat to our to those kinds of services, and something we really need to be careful about.
Sure.
Through the chair, just to follow up, I do agree, and that's one thing I noticed before I even got here, the way that you envision the library. It's not a library, it's a community center and hub. So I appreciate with that comes added responsibility. So I'm happy that you're viewing it that way, but I just think if we put our heads together, we might come up with some solutions.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Seeing no further questions, I think budget seems very reasonable, and I don't know that we can quantify exactly the value that not just the library as a space and the learning, but all of the add-on services, especially over the last couple of years, have had on our community. I think it's significant. And certainly, I imagine if you talk to the people who use the service, they would say it's significant and has a huge impact on their life. So I really appreciate all you do. And thank you. We're going to receive this for information, and then we will be back at council the day, November 6th, I think. November 20th for this. Yes, so much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Councillor Van Dyke.
Yes, my apologies. I had an additional question, and I'm not sure where it fell in what was covered, and I just realized I still had it, and I believe we're at the end of the agenda.
Is it for the library?
No, it's
Okay, you
from-
guys can go.
Thank you, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's on page 38 of the agenda packet, and it's regarding the organization salary adjustments. There's two new positions, the Director of Municipal Works and Manager of Enterprise Risk. And I was just wondering what these positions included as job descriptions, and where did those responsibilities lie before becoming these positions?
Thank you, through the chair, to Councillor Van Dyke. Just let me flip to my page, and then I will certainly answer. So the first position you mentioned, the Director of Municipal Works. In the previous structure, we had a director over what we called the city assets, and that group was a large group. It had over 139 employees. It managed the major roadways, waterways, sewer lines, airport, as well as the solid waste collection. So as a part of the corporate restructuring, it was decided to split this. And so there's a director now over the municipal works as well as over the environmental utilities. And the other position that you mentioned is the manager of enterprise risk. So this position is a new position within the city specifically to address corporate enterprise risk. This person will be responsible to lead the enterprise risk management framework and process of risk management within the city of Medicine Hat.
So the responsibilities that that person has now previously did not exist, or they were spread out over multiple people in different departments, or? Okay. Yes, I'm just trying to figure out where they came from. Thank you.
Which one was it? Spread out over multiple or moved from a different department?
Through the chair, I'll pass that to
Okay.
Managing Director Egert.
Go ahead.
So I can speak through the chair to the second one, the enterprise risk manager. We had created a framework maybe a year and a half ago that was being done by several people. That we needed more focus on not only implementing the framework, but also executing it throughout the organization into the operations. So from that perspective, it's new to create the focus on enterprise risk.
My apologies, everyone. I know you want to go home, but can you give me a little brief description of what enterprise risk encompasses within the city of Medicine Hat?
Through the chair, thank you for that question. That's a great question. Any organization our size should understand those risks that are laying before them, which includes opportunities as well. Essentially, anything that could go wrong or impact us achieving council's strategic plan would be considered a risk event that we would like to know about and we would like to mitigate. So it's a very strategic and direct, intentional focus on risks and mitigation of those risks over time. So you can expect to see in the business plans and the budgets items related to how do we progress along energy transition, for example. How do we ensure that we attract and retain employees? And those are two examples of enterprise risks. You can easily say them, but there's a lot of work in terms of actually mitigating that risk in the organization. So we maybe have, I'm going to say 20 plus of those type of risks that we just need to be aware of and manage.
Can I add to that?
Yep, go ahead.
So this was something that was a bit of a darling of myself that I asked for it to be brought on. I've went through the journey of enterprise risk management, both professionally and another organization that I was belong with. I think it's an absolute must-have. What ends up happening is that it's actually a journey that you take that is led by, in some cases, council in terms of what the level of risk the city of Medicine Hat is prepared to endure, both reputational risk, financial risk, all the risks that come into play can actually be quantified and put into a bit of a graph. It's like a heat graph, if you will, which will, when utilized properly, should be able to predict and be able to tell us as councillors what's the level of risk, and if there's still risk remaining, what's the mitigation of the remaining risk. And I'll give you a bit of example. So for example, any type of purchase that we might buy within Comco, we would do an analysis, or anything that we get involved in, a risk analysis gets done, and it really does tell you, have we successfully reduce the risk. So like reputation risk, if we brought in something a bit controversial, we could have that discussion, that would fit into the parameters as well. So it is an attempt to quantify something that is difficult to quantify based on risk. So I think I'm excited for a little bit of the journey that we are going to be embarking on, because it is very helpful for an organization to understand where we color outside the lines and where we color inside the lines, and we need to build that framework, so.
I have one last question. As part of the Strong Towns Initiative, we were expecting to see an analysis of our long-term infrastructure liabilities and overall health of the city's long-term financial perspective. Do you know when we might see that?
Through the chair, I have the privilege of being on that Strong Towns Committee, working on that project in particular. I don't have any particular deadlines for you as far as quantifying that liability. I know that work is going on within the organization at large to put together an asset management program that will quantify that in detail. We're still working through the details of what that might look like in the interim to try to estimate that utility liability. We have been working diligently on long-range forecast models, which I'm not sure the timeline of when those things will be ready to present and to walk through, but I can tell you those things are in process currently.
Do you think like 6 months or a year? Will we have it before the next budget?
Through the chair, I think the intention, at least from my perspective with the budget, is that we would be providing those as a part of our budget process next year.
All right, seeing no further questions and no further business, this meeting is adjourned.